Hello, this is PS. Yesterday's T1 vs Mad game was shocking in a way. We were surprised once in Game 1 and once more in Game 3. T1 fans probably felt relieved by a number of points. And probably the point that has been talked about most is Oner's jungle Maokai and its stability. But there's something quite interesting in his jungle Maokai build. Today we're going to take a quick look at his Maokai build and see if there's anything we can apply to solo queue. Maokai is a champion who often appears on the PS channel. The champion itself has a very solid composition and is a high value pick, so if you can get him in a good enough shape, he can be in the spotlight both in solo queue and team games. It's a pick that really lowers the difficulty of engages and increases team stability, especially in recent team games. There has been a strong preference for value picks in ADCs, so having Maokai in your team is a huge plus. Actually, that's not enough to get him on the PS channel often. Secondly, the reason we were able to feature him so often is because he has many different item builds. The builds differ depending on whether you want to add a bit more deal or build full tank. If you compare Maokai from earlier this season when he was just single-handedly carrying the meta, and the Maokai build that's being considered now, it seems very different. Right now, Maokai is in the appropriate weight class. It means that he can appear frequently on the PS channel. First of all, for top Maokai we mentioned that he hasn't gotten as much attention as he deserves. When you consider his performance, he's a honey champ, and that we could even consider the Abyssal Mask Even Shroud build. For jungle Maokai, we said it's also pretty good with reasonable value, and especially for those who are still going for the deal build, consider Sunfire Aegis Radiant Virtue to make it easier to climb. And, in yesterday's MSI bracket stage, T1 Oner took his jungle Maokai build one step further. The review for Bami's Cinder Radiant Virtue Abyssal Mask Maokai starts now. There's a reason we've reviewed all the Maokai builds we've talked about before in the intro. The build that Oner chose is actually a compilation of the latest Maokai builds that we've introduced on the PS channel. It's kind of like a mix of Abyssal Mask Even Shroud Maokai, which we reviewed as a top build, with the build we reviewed as Jungle Sunfire Aegis Radiant Virtue Maokai. What changed from here is that instead of completing Sunfire Aegis, he only built until Bami's and then branched out to the next item. Instead of Sunfire Aegis, Oner built Bami's first, then Radiant Virtue, and chose a build that bought Abyssal Mask. While it would be nice to be able to stack core items, it looks like he has chosen what's most efficient on a tight budget. The first reason for this build choice is the high value of Bami's Cinder. With last year's patch 12.11 buffs to tank items, it made Bami's Cinder a very affordable item at 1000 gold. Among first items, it gives you both durability and jungling speed, so it has good value for the price. Originally, we built Ionian boots first, but Bami's Cinder is also a great first item because it's very cheap and is broken down into sub-items, so is easy to build. Bami's Immolate passive damage is especially helpful for early game jungling speed, as it gives you a 25% damage boost against jungle monsters. Bami alone can give you 18 damage per second against jungle monsters. But then, doesn't that mean I can just buy Bami and build Sunfire Aegis? You might ask. Why not complete the build and branch out? If you look closely, the extra damage to jungle monsters disappears on Sunfire Aegis. So you don't see a huge difference in jungling speed when you have Bami versus right after completing Sunfire Aegis. As a result, it isn't cost effective for jungle Maokai to build a lot of items. He also needs to stay next to the enemy champion to maximize item effectiveness, as the stacks build up and his immolate damage becomes stronger. However, jungle Maokai usually has lower champion growth expectancy than Maokai in lane. He prefers to gank, go in with RW and then get out. So it's not so much about building up immolate stacks, but more about messing up with your enemies and then heading out to wait for your skills to come off cooldown is much easier and stronger to play. Jungle Maokai itself is a lot more difficult now for a full build with deal than it used to be. So it's definitely based on tank items, but by building Sunfire Aegis Radiant Virtue, it can be seen as an attempt to efficiently alleviate even the slightest bit of incompatibility. This incompatible relationship between jungle Maokai and Sunfire Aegis can be seen in yesterday's MSI match as well. Actually, if you look at Oner's Maokai play, In teamfights, he uses ult first, and then with phase rush, approaches to enemy dealers to use W. Then he moves out slightly, waiting for skill cooldown to come off, and then try to enter again. It's a bit of a different playstyle when you're doing damage with Immolate, while aggroing all the enemy focus, although you're sticking close to the enemy. Especially since you can often use ult from a distance before you even enter the teamfight, or your allies start the teamfight first. There are fewer situations where Maokai has enough time to linger around. If you're going for this play, use ult first, wait for skill cooldowns, and then hit and run. You don't necessarily have to build Sunfire Aegis. And this is not only true for Oner, but also for other players playing jungle Maokai. They use ult first, then quickly focus on the front line. And after that, move around near ally dealers ready to use his skills. It's hard to see Maokai use Sunfire Aegis effectively when he's constantly lingering near the enemy. So Maokai starts by using ult first. And it makes more sense to give buffs to your allies as soon as you use ult, before even entering the skirmish. Accelerate the timing of purchasing Radiant Virtue. Even if you just build Bamis, it will cover your jungling speed anyway. And the most efficient builds seem to be one that builds Radiant Virtue to get the most health, armor, and ability haste. Maximizing his strength from engages by moving up the engage timing without actually slowing his growth at all. It's a build that's optimized for Maokai. It also has advantages in terms of item builds. Firstly, in patch 12.22, the price of Aegis of the Legion dropped by 200 gold. So now you can get 30 armor and 10 ability haste for 1200 gold, which is a pretty good value for money. As a result, when you consider item builds, when you build Bami's Ionian Boots Aegis of the Legion, you'll get a decent stat boost of 300 health, 30 armor, and 30 ability haste for 3150 gold. It costs 2700 gold to complete Sunfire Aegis. Compared to the cost of Sunfire Aegis plus boots, it seems like an attractive option to build items at a lower cost with higher value. Again, it obviously accelerates the timing of Radiant Virtue. After quickly building Bami's Radiant Virtue like this, you can follow it up with Abyssal Mask to complete an extremely efficient build. As we talked about last time, it gives you a lot of health and can also increase your allies' AP damage potential. So Abyssal Mask and Maokai synergize really well. This build is packed with items that benefits early jungling, his role in teamfights, and even item synergies that you shouldn't waste. This build can be characterized as a jungle Maokai build that is targeted on him and pushes him to the max. And we think this is a build that will see more light in the next patch. Maokai is definitely not underpowered right now. If you're considering jungle Maokai, remember the Bami's Radiant Virtue Abyssal Mask build. We think the main build will definitely shift to this build. And there may be more builds that actively utilize Bamis. Today we've taken a look at the jungle Maokai build that Oner used at MSI. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.